Alright, so you guys asked for this, and so now I'm going to make the video on it. How to price your artwork. This is a dry subject, so bear in mind a lot of the numbers start to get convoluted if you fall behind. So I'll try to take my time with it and show you the basics of it. And we're not going to talk about anything crazy like multi-print runs or large-scale production runs of paintings, or starting to get into the macro side of business. We're just going to deal with the micro side of economics on your business with just a single item. So if you have a question about how to price your paintings, your sculptures, your cups, your mugs, your bowls, your silver, your jewelry, and you just have this one item and you don't know exactly what to charge for it, this is how you can easily figure out the cost of almost anything based upon a simple formula. So there's going to be three factors when it comes to pricing your work. And that's going to be, you need to know what your materials cost. And for the sake of this one, we're going to call that MA. Okay. You need to know what your man hours are. That's the actual time you've spent on the work and with correspondence and trying to sell the work. This is not, on the other side, account for things like booths or any sort of like the actual retail side after you produce the work. This is all just basically like all the pre-work, actual work, and end work. Now the next one is going to be your overhead. Now, your overhead is basically everything that is not a direct cost of materials for the product. So this would not count for anything that would even be an ephemeral office product. This would be like power, water, shop, etc. So accounting for that, how much those things actually cost you, helps out if you know what those costs are. And we're going to talk about this for even if you have your own house or anything like that. We're going to break down some basic costs of, so you know what it costs you even if you're not renting a retail space or a studio and making your own work. But these three things right here are your basics of an entire realm of microeconomics, of knowing how to price your work. All right, so with that being said, let's get into the formula. It's a very simple formula. All it basically is that you got your materials and you want to apply margins to certain things. A margin is just, you can account for that as a potential loss because of mistakes, time, increased material costs, ephemeral costs being more worked into the margin for things you don't know about, like the cost of push pins, for example, or paper for your printer, each sheet of paper. So little things, this is where your material margin comes into play. And generally, I say I need about 1.5 times the material cost to go into my margin. That accounts for, like, say you have a bad day in ceramics and you flop 3 bowls, or the kiln explodes, like somebody's piece in the kiln explodes and it just takes out all your pieces. It covers those things. Now you add that to your man hours. Now you want to apply a margin to this, and I stress this more than anything else. Your man hours is easy enough to account for. That's easy enough. You start the day at 8 o'clock, you end the day at 6 o'clock. You can count for, I worked 3 hours on this piece, I worked an hour on this piece, etc. What it doesn't account for is paperwork, or having to do filing, or ordering, or dealing with people on the phone because your product was lost. Again, apply margin. I usually like to do ×2 as a margin, just because it doubles my time up, gives me a little bit of a buffer. And I'll see why you can change some of these things. And your man hours are going to be your total hours times the pay that you want. Okay? And you're going to double that. Gives you that buffer. Plus your overhead. Now, if you have a margin to your man hours, apply a margin to your overhead as well, because if you lost time here, you're going to lose time here, and you want your overhead to be covered regardless of your hours here. And it doesn't need to be that much, because I mean, generally, if you lose this does not really affect the total amount of overhead lost over here. So it's usually about 1.25. It gives you a little bit of a freedom room, and that will give you your base cost. So, simple, very, very simple equation. Now your overhead, let's start with the most static cost that you're going to have. It's going to be your overhead. Knowing how much you cost per hour with everything around you. Because I don't know about you, but all my material costs, like all my machine costs, like my computers, or like even people who do digital art, they have computers, they have power, they have internet, they have phones. So you have overhead even if like people think you don't. So overhead, equipment. That's a bit of like a rolling number. Usually every 2 years you want to replace computers. Every 3 years you want to replace heavy equipment because you're using it that much, or 5 years if you don't use it that much. Plus, it's a tax thing. So you need to figure out your equipment cost, and then if you can for the year, break it down to a month, because your month is going to determine how much we can break it down per day and then by per hour. The next one you're going to have is rent, mortgage, whatever, studio space. I'm just going to say rent. So you have a certain cost, even if you just are using your dining room table, that is like what, 5% of a total house cost. So you can figure out your what that table costs you to use in your house for your artwork. You can actually take your cost of your mortgage or your rent or whatever, divide it by that 5%, and then you come out with the total cost per month that it costs you to have that table or that studio or whatever. Then you have phone, internet, water, etc., etc., etc. For sake of argument, I'm going to go with a number of about $600 just for this, because it's a nice simple number, and I'll show you why. So for the total overhead, let's just assume you have $600 in overhead per month. Now, if you want to figure that out per day and then per hour, that's pretty simple as well. On average, even if you work full time, it's about 20 days out of the month, 20 to 22, because you have 2 days off per week, 4 weeks, that's 8 days, 20 to 22. So if we figure out that each day it costs us $30 worth of overhead to run our business right here, then we know that if we only want to work 5 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 3 hours a day, we can break that down per hour and base it upon our scheduling on this job. So really extremely simple. But this is one of those things where knowing your overhead, you can break it down and then everything gets paid for. And especially with a little bit of a margin, you have a buffer. So let's just assume that you're not doing it every single day. Let's just assume you spend about 4 hours a day, or let's just say 5 hours a day, 20 days a month. That comes out to being $6. I'm right? Yeah. That comes out to being, $6 per hour. $6 per hour. And that's a static cost. $6. Regardless of anything, if I want to go into my shop, I know that each day is going to cost me $30, and I need to charge $6 per hour on every single job I have, regardless of what I do. Now, your man hours and material costs. Let's just say we're going to work on a painting. So now this is where our math comes down. So we know our static costs here. Let's talk about our pay. Our pay is a hard one to come figure out. You're not a technician. You're not somebody working in a manufacturing field. You're an artist. You're a skilled laborer. So you need to figure out what your actual pay cost comes out to. Let's just say we say $20 an hour. That's a decent amount, not a whole lot. I mean, I'd probably go for like 35 or 40 because stuff. But let's just say you say $20 an hour. And that figures out when I figure out my man hours, I can know that however many hours at $20 per hour, that's my man hour cost. And then your materials, we'll figure that out. So let's just say we have a painting that we're making, or a cup or a bowl or whatever. But let's just go with a painting because those costs are easy. A canvas costs you $18. You're gonna use about $6 in materials for like paint and maybe like a new brush and little things like that. And you might have some tape or some this thing or a little that thing. So let's just say you have a total material cost of $30. We apply our margin of that, and we instantly have $45 is the total material cost of that painting. Not bad, not great. You can probably cut down somewhere. Maybe it's a big painting, you never know. For that big painting, let's just say, for example, you spent 6 hours on that painting. It's your time, it's worth it. So you spent 6 hours on that painting, you know that that's going to cost you $120 in man hours. Double that up because, things get away from you sometimes. That right there is a total cost of $240. Then you have your overhead. You now know that you spent 6 hours on this, put 6 hours in there. That's $36 that's $36 with a margin overhead of 1.25 because it's not much of an increase. And I'm going to use a calculator for this one because my brain's kind of tired right now. And that's a $45 cost as well. So right now I know that our base cost is going to be $330. That's not bad for a painting, but this does not make you any money. This is the cost where if you sold this as is, you have a job. You're not making making money as an art business. This doesn't account for really a lot of like taxes and inventory stuff and just little things that just would whittle you down. Plus, if you wanted to build up a coffer so you can buy that new piece of equipment, this won't do it. This just maintains you. This won't advance you. So now, this being the base, you now have two additional costs. You will have the wholesale cost, and then you have the retail cost. Now, wholesale is whenever a gallery gets a hold of it, you send it out to another place. Maybe you have a whole big run, and a retail store wants to get a hold of your stuff, like a clothing store, a boutique, furniture store, and they want to sell your stuff. They want to know what the wholesale cost is, and that is what you want to figure out. I usually say it's going to be about 1.5 times that. Makes it easy, makes it gives you a little bit of a buffer. And with something like this, makes this $495 wholesale for a painting or whatever it is you're doing. Not a bad cost. Now we get into the retail. Anybody who buys this end product, this is going to be your established retail cost. This is the same cost that you're going to sell to the people at the craft fairs. This is the same people that people in galleries will see. This is where, like, all of the labor costs of selling paintings usually goes. So if anybody ever says, I don't like dealing with galleries because they take 50% of my money, it's like they're not taking 50% of their money. They have their own sort of markups and pricing that they have to do, and it usually comes out to being 50% of whatever they sell it for, they keep. And that's fair because that's retail. I mean, Walmart works on 80% profit markup above your stuff, not just 50%. So if you assume that any sort of gallery or anything like that will come through and say, I need I want to sell this painting, they're going to probably sell this at $990 or more. And the or more is a good one because any sort of good retailer will try to get more for it and then bringing the cost down to $990 at a last resort. So that way you get $495 and your base cost is that, which makes you have an actual profit of $165 for that one painting that you achieve pure profit on. It's not bad, but that's microeconomics on one painting. Not a hard thing to think about, but if you take just a standard formula and you could break all this stuff down, you can actually know how much you make on every single thing. So, and this works with almost everything. Applying this out here, if I still know that I have the same overhead costs, I still have the same pay costs, and if I should decide, today I want to do ceramics, and I sit there and go, let's see what I can sell ceramics for. Whether that's a cup, bowl, whatever. Let's just assume we do a bowl. I use about 2 pounds of clay for a cup or a bowl. That comes out to being, with glazes, about $350. I know that it takes me, after all the firings and all this stuff like this, that I usually lay my hands on a cup or a bowl for about an hour and 25 minutes, hour and 15 minutes on average. And that's through getting the clay prepared, making the items, letting it dry, trimming it, firing it, glazing it, firing it, getting it back out, inspecting it. A whole 9 yards. About an hour and 15 minutes. Usually it's larger scale. So I got about an hour and 15 minutes worth of time. So that's 1.25 times 20 is what, $25? $25 for my actual man hours. And then, of course, again, got about an hour and 15 minutes in that cup. So let's see here. That's going to be what, 750? 750 worth of overhead times 1.25 times 2 times 1.5. That means materials are 525. This is 50. And $940 basically. So I know that my cost of my base cost of anything I do for an hour and a half would need to be a $64, let's just say 65, a $65 item in ceramics for an hour worth of my time doing it. Now, ceramics is a little bit on the fuzzy side because if I had a cup, I'm not going to spend, $65 base cost on that, or even, $85 for a cup for something that's going to be, whatever. Unless it's amazing, and most of the times the market would only justify $25 for like a cup, and that's for ceramics. So there's a little bit of a difference of perceived value versus actual value. So when you see people who sell cups and stuff like that for $15 or $20, and it's for ceramics, and you apply a general markup, general pricing to it, and you figure out that they basically are working for about $3 an hour, sort of makes you question whether or not they value their own time. Now on the other side, if you can remove like your overhead, you can drop some of your man hours here for something like, so for example, if I was only working with ceramics and I could know that I'm not dealing with a double overtime or double markup here because it's not just a big painting, it would be like maybe just like a 1.1, and then I'm considering it ceramics, so I might charge myself I might pay myself $15 an hour. You can see those sort of things start to drop. Maybe you don't have this much of a workup because again I'm working with more product, so it might be like 1.25, and this same thing. So you have little things where this might not be 1.25. This just might be just the overhead. Then you can start to see these costs change drastically, where this starts to become about half that cost. So you start to get around to that area. But a little bit of a simple one, a lot to master, but simple math on this. And I'll put this formula up here so that way you guys can sit there and apply this to your own as you need be and see if it works for you. And feel free to tweak any of this as you need to. This is just a general pricing. Anybody who comes in to ask me what to price something, that's the formula I give them, just because that gives them room to grow. Not just room to make stuff and make money at it and make okay money at it, but room to grow. So it doesn't matter where you make t-shirts, ceramics, mugs, paintings, roof tiles. It doesn't matter. it's a good pricing structure to start to work at. And then, from here you can expand it out to uh, large production runs and multi-print, pricing, and start getting into the things like having to work in the cost of storage loss and all the other stuff like that, all into these complex algorithms, which is basically just algebra 1. We saw that. I've seen this math since middle school, so nothing new here. So, if you guys have any questions or comments, just let me know down below. Have a nice day.